Hi there, folks. Welcome to this week's astrological report for June 24 through June 30 of 2025. Hope you're all doing well. So this week we have a lot going on. We have another week of a lot of fate and destiny at play in multiple different ways that I'll be talking about. Currently we have the moon for the next day still in the last lunar cycle of Gemini, closing that out in the dark phase. The moon has to go through a few difficult aspects for the next day that has been in the background for a while that's shown a lot of the difficulties. So once we get past that, by tomorrow on June 25, the moon does reach the sun and we have a Cancer new moon conjunct Jupiter. Now this is one of the best cycles of the year, so things are likely to start to improve in a lot of ways. A lot of the challenges are going to slowly start moving away in the temporary. So that's good news, and I'll be talking about that new moon. And we also have a lot of stuff going on here with Mercury. We have Mercury square Chiron. That's actually already been exact overnight hours. It's going to start to separate for the rest of today, but it was technically exact in the overnight hours. And we also have Mercury sextile Uranus at the end of Taurus. And then Mercury is going to be changing signs. That's a pretty big change overall. Mercury ingressing Leo. And then we're going to have Mercury in Leo start to align in an easier way with Saturn and Neptune on this world point. So a lot of things about the mind, important communications are going to be happening, and overall a lot more fiery, passionate communications is going to be coming in, but also we're aligned now in a better way as time goes on with this new world dynamic that's shaping up. Mercury will also be opposing Pluto, and that's going to be a strong dynamic, a lot of power plays, a lot of drama and intensity with communications. And then Mercury, by next Monday, next week, will enter its retrograde shadow at 4 degrees. Mercury will be going all through Leo, all the way to about 15 degrees as we go through the first 2.5 weeks of July, and then go retrograde. And retrograde all the way back to 4 degrees of Leo. So the first half of Leo is where Mercury will be going retrograde. Just because Mercury enters its retrograde shadow this week doesn't mean we're going to deal with Mercury retrograde topics. That's just an area that we're going to be looking at for an extended period of time, is these, again, the first half of Leo. Now we also have, and the good thing about that, by the way, is that Mercury's not going to retrograde all the way back to the opposition with Pluto. So once Mercury gets past that opposition with Pluto by, looks like Sunday, then we're done with that for good. And the other thing is Venus. Venus is also aligning with the nodes of fate this week. So a lot of fateful dynamics about relationships and financial stuff going on. Now, some of the bigger changes are going to be later on in July. And that's because once we get to next week's report, Venus is going to reach Uranus at the end of Taurus, and they're both going to ingress Gemini. That's going to be a really big change. And then, of course, Neptune will start to go retrograde. Neptune's already, really slow, barely moving. Saturn will eventually go retrograde. Mercury will be retrograde. So we're going to see even more changes as we go deeper into July. But this is the last week of June, and it is a good lunar cycle, like I said, with the Sun conjunct Jupiter. That's actually happening today, Sun conjunct Jupiter. That's later on. That's, it's this morning, actually. So all day today, the Sun is conjunct Jupiter, which is highlighting a lot. There's big energetics going on. But I think that we still have a few challenges, like I said, until the moon gets through this dynamic of Gemini in the first few degrees of Cancer and then reaches that new moon. Now that new moon, conjunct Jupiter, it is very positive overall, but it's still within a couple orbs of the Saturn-Neptune square. And so what that means is as time goes on, things get better and better. At first, everything isn't just perfect, but it's the beginning of a change of dynamics for the better. And then also that new moon in harmony with Mars, which is still in Virgo here. Mars is at 4 degrees this week and moving forward. So we still have a lot going on over here in Virgo. And this week, the moon will be waxing all through Cancer, all through Leo, and all through Virgo, and reach the nodes of fate by Monday. And then next week, the moon will be ingressing Libra, going through Scorpio, Sagittarius, and building forward. So definitely a lot going on this week. Let's see, the sun just has that conjunction to Jupiter. The sun is also in conjunct to Pluto, and that's going on today as well. Actually, it just made that perfect in conjunction that you see here. So there's been this finger of God basically pointing right towards Pluto this last 24 hours. So finger of gods, there was also one pointing towards Mars in the weekend when we had these, big events in the world going on. So these finger of gods just show that there's fateful dynamics playing out in the world, and that's continuing yesterday and today as that finger of God is still kind of in place until it starts to separate. But the sun in conjunct to Pluto, there's still a lot of adjustment that's trying to be had here between this positive safety, security dynamic versus politics, the group, the community, the intensity out in the world where Pluto is. And overall, we just looking at this chart, we see that there's a T-square in place with the moon today. Nodes of fate are being activated. So again, it's a very fateful moment here. And also the square from Mercury to Chiron. There's still some sensitivity in the air and some difficult communications going on. But again, it's going to start to separate as we get to tomorrow and beyond. But it does look like this next, got to give this one more day for some of the most challenging stuff here. We're going to have a few obstacles off and on throughout the week looking at this aspect list, but like I said, overall, we're coming into one of the most positive cycles, relatively speaking, of course. Doesn't mean everything's perfect. And like I said, you got to give it time for that Jupiter, Sun, and Moon to be separating from Saturn and Neptune. Also, the Moon still has to go through that square with Saturn and Neptune. And the square to Neptune, even if the Sun was squaring Neptune this last couple of days, not everything as it appears to be. There's a lot of stuff that people just aren't clear about. So you have to be very careful getting wrapped up into collective nonsense or beliefs of just things that aren't true, because even though things look pretty tough right now and they have through the weekend, it's not as bad as what it seems to be. And there is going to be this changing dynamic coming in. So in the temporary, there's still a bigger dynamic, around military and war stuff for the world in the bigger context. But again, I kind of see that more as 2026 when we enter a little more of a critical territory about war stuff. So I'm not too concerned about world war or major war this year, besides these, things going on in the temporary that I think June was one of the hardest months that we had to get through. So even on a personal level, June was a pretty tough month overall with these squares to Saturn going on. And this new moon coming up should be a lot better for a lot of people. Now, with that said, Cancer is at odds with the other cardinal signs, including Aries, Capricorn, and Libra. So if you have a lot of planets in those three signs, Capricorn, Libra, Aries, then Cancer season is never going to be your best time out of the year. And with Jupiter here, it shows that all the cardinal signs are going to be really amplified and really expanding. And for Aries, Capricorn, and Libra, it's more of kind of overextended and over-amplified in a way that's not as comfortable. But Cancer has some of the best. If you have a lot of personal planets in the first half of Cancer, then you're really going to be activated in this bigger way with Jupiter. But if you have planets at the later degrees of Cancer, you're going to benefit from Jupiter the most this year, because Jupiter goes all the way to about 25 degrees of Cancer on November 11th, and then we'll go retrograde back over all those later degrees into the teens, and then station direct and move through those again. So the later degrees of Cancer gets like 3 passes of Jupiter. But if you just have, personal planets in the beginning of Cancer, you're really just getting 1 pass of Jupiter this year, and you're not going to get as much of the abundance as the later degrees of Cancer. But if you have later degrees of Cancer, you're not going to start to get that abundance from Jupiter until you get later on into August, September, and beyond. Just wanted to throw that out there. All right, so yeah, of course, I'm going to write out all the aspects for you in the description below with timestamps so you can follow along. There's a link if you want to buy a personalized report from me. You can get on my work list. I'm right about 2.5 week turnaround right now, so pretty quick overall compared to a lot of other people. All right, so with that, I'm going to start going through the chart day by day. And we start here on Tuesday. And first thing in the morning, the moon is at 21 degrees of Gemini, T-squaring the nodes of fate. So again, today, right off the bat, is a very fateful day. But the moon is in the dark phase. So it's a little bit of a challenging moon for the next day, like I said, in multiple ways. So there's a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff going on here. There's a lot of variety and mental stimulation. And today is a day where the world, or even individuals that have personal degrees around 21, 22, are at a fateful crossroads today based on information and circumstances that are playing out. At the same time, we had this Chiron activated from Mercury, so there could still be some sensitive communication. You have to be careful of how you're communicating with yourself, with others, how you're thinking, because you have to make sure that you don't get too negative, or you have to be careful of how you're talking to others, because people could be offended or they could be hurt by your words, very easily, or you could be hurt by people's words. Mercury's in Cancer. It's a little more sensitive, activating this Chiron in Aries, which has a lot to say about the self and confidence and things. And there can be a little bit of tension here too between your individuality, your freedom and independence, the self basically, and then your need for safety and security, home and family stuff. And that's a big thing going on from this point forward, is a strong focus on the home, the family, safety and security needs, comfort, and it's big focus on the homeland, basically your homeland in the bigger context. And in the world context, definitely the homeland is in focus. And everything is really amplified today, though, because the sun is reaching this conjunction with Jupiter, and that's right after the moon goes through this T-square. So I think, again, whatever's happening first thing in the morning here is going to be one of the most fateful parts of the day. But it's still in play all day, I would say. The fate and the destiny and the crossroads that people are at. But yes, the sun is conjunct Jupiter. A lot of people say this is like one of the best days out of the year. I don't think so, because of these other dynamics going on. I think this new moon is definitely one of the best lunar cycles, like I've said, but you have to give that time, because a lunar cycle is a whole month, so we're going to see that play out over the next month, the more positive side of this. All right, so Sun conjunct Jupiter today. Just consider that all day long. And there's a focus on what people need. Now, this typically is a pretty good spot, especially because Jupiter is exalted. But the issue with it is that the Sun conjunct Jupiter in Cancer is ruled by the moon, and the moon is in the dark moon phase, hidden, doesn't have a lot of light and consciousness on it. It's in an area that's, like I said, a lot of mental stimulation, a lot of communication, a lot of even confusion that we kind of have to go through. And yet the sun is focused on, beliefs and faith and justice and what's right. And there is the beginning of a sense of how can we get what we need in a better way, and again, more safety, more security, more comfort, how to get our emotional needs met. But we're not quite clear about that just yet, because again, it comes right back to the dark moon phase. And plus the moon has to square Saturn. We're still going to have to get through a few challenges of feelings about all this stuff that's being highlighted from the sun and Jupiter. So laws and rules could be highlighted in new ways that are regarding safety and security for families, for homes, and in the world context for the homeland. So that is a major part of the day. And Looks like the moon is also going to sextile Chiron as the day goes on before it changes signs. So there will be a mood change later on, but for most of the day, the moon is in Gemini. Moving forward here throughout Tuesday. So again, most of the day, I think it's busy, very active, doing multiple things, a lot of variety, a lot of strong communications that are fateful. And then with moon sextile Chiron, we can feel maybe something a little better about the self as we go through the evening, late afternoon and evening hours, right before there's a big mood change, and the moon then ingresses into Cancer. And that's going to be by tonight. Yeah, that's 8:43 on the West Coast is when the moon changes signs into Cancer. Its home sign. It's still in the dark moon phase, though, behind the sun. But still, I think this is going to be the beginning of a big change, but we still have to get through this square. That the moon is like closing out all this stuff that's been going on for this last month of June. So all the difficulties that Jupiter was making to Saturn and Neptune, these big issues of restriction, limitation versus trying to grow and expand into new territory, the sun, that's been going through this challenging dynamic with Saturn and Neptune. Now the moon is really about, okay, this is the last bit of that. We're going to close all that difficulty out before we get to this new abundance cycle. So the difficulty is tonight and in the overnight hours of Monday night into, or rather Tuesday night into Wednesday morning here. Because the last aspect for tonight on June 24th, now this is really late, so this is 11:27 tonight for people on the West Coast, and it's the early morning hours, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning on the East Coast, first thing in the morning in the UK and other places in Europe, is some of the challenge of the moon squaring Saturn and then Neptune after that. So this is a little bit heavy. This is uncomfortable. This is picking up on the battle and the challenges, like I just said, that we've already been going through. But it's the end of it. So don't get carried away, with getting too depressed or heavy. But there is a little bit of something that could feel heavy here tonight and into the morning hours. There could also be other things going on, like earth events still, or weather events, or just critical things in the world that we're still dealing with that challenges a sense of safety, security, and comfort that the moon is picking up on. But the moon and sun are wrapped around Jupiter, so it is kind of it could go either way. For some people it could be starting to feel more positive, but I think we still have to get through this square basically before some of the easier stuff comes in. So that's Tuesday, and then we do get into these morning hours of Wednesday, June 25, and again, the overnight hours, early morning hours, the moon is squaring Neptune. So a lot of emotional confusion, a little bit of uncertainty, not seeing everything clearly, because the moon is dark. It has no light on it, plus it's squaring Neptune and Saturn. So you have to be very careful of getting wrapped up into delusional things or false ideas or feelings that aren't necessarily true. And just be very careful what's going on in the world, what you hear, and how you take it. Because again, with the sun squaring Saturn and Neptune through the weekend and into this week, people have been saying a lot of stuff, about the world, about what's going on. And I just don't think people are clear. They're not seeing the reality of the truth of what's happening right now and what it all means. So you got to be careful of getting sucked into delusional ideas or beliefs of things and just not seeing things clearly. So be patient if you are feeling anything, but again, this could also be literal things happening that are challenging, like weather or earthly stuff or other challenges that could come up tonight into tomorrow morning. Because that's the first aspect, is that moon square Neptune. It's highly sensitive, basically, very, very sensitive in the overnight hours. And then the moon has to make that quincunx to Pluto, the same as Jupiter did, the same as the sun made. So again, there's two different areas that we're having to deal with at the same time. Cancer is all about the inner life, the family, the safety, the security, the comfort, being more guarded and protective, having that shell over us and just being in your place that feels more safe and secure. But yet we can't shake this power dynamic in Aquarius. And that's going to be politics. That's going to be the world. That's going to be the group, the friends, the community, a lot of intensity and power plays and transformation that we're having to adjust to out in the world versus our inner world and our home and family life. So still strong emotions and feelings and sensitivity going on first thing in the morning on Wednesday. And then it all starts to change because we get to the new moon. And again, this is going to start to be one of the more positive cycles that we get to work with. So the moon will then be conjunct Jupiter, and emotions are big and strong. For the most part, though, this is an extremely positive moon conjunct Jupiter, even though the moon is still in the dark phase. Because the moon is so strong in its home sign of Cancer. This is where it wants to be. It's comfortable here once it gets past these other challenges outside of the self. But Jupiter's exalted. So there begins to be a sense of, okay, we can start to feel actually more and more safe and secure as time goes on, and we can start to get our needs met in an easier way. We still have a very strong Venus reaching the last degrees of Taurus now, the last 10 degrees at this point forward from this new moon. And again, that shows the markets should be doing pretty well. Value of things should be pretty well. There's going to be some fluctuations and some overall changes in preferences and desires and financial things as we get to next week, because of Venus starting to reach Uranus, but not necessarily bad. Just some changes and some volatility, but not right now. Right now we have a very strong Venus doing very well, and we have a moon doing very well from this point forward, conjunct Jupiter, very abundant and feeling very abundant. So it can also start to bring in more goodwill, and wanting to be nurtured, nurture others, just be more, kind of being, it is a very sensitive time here. We got both the moon and the sun in Cancer wrapped around Jupiter. So feelings are big, so feelings can be amplified for good or bad, but it's typically going to be more positive unless you have a lot of difficult transits in your birth chart right now. Like if Mars is squaring your sun or your moon, or other major aspects you're going through, there's always exceptions. But generally speaking, the mood starts to be much more generous and abundant for giving and receiving. It's still in its own safe place. Your home and your family is where some of the best dynamics are, generally speaking, or in your birth chart, wherever you have the sign Cancer. That's where this whole next cycle is going to be focused on. That's where the most growth and expansion is going to be happening with Jupiter here for the next year. So look at your chart and see where you have the sign of Cancer. That area wants to be showing more support for you, whatever that is for you, whatever area that is. All right, so the moon crosses over Jupiter, and then we get to this new moon, which is going to be exactly at 4 degrees, 7 minutes of Cancer. So also check your chart. This is Wednesday, early morning. So it's going to be first thing in the morning for a lot of people. It'll be later in the morning for people in the UK. But first thing in the morning, basically, we start this brand new cycle. So check your chart. Do you have any personal planets about 4 degrees of Cancer? If you do, then this new moon is right on one of your personal planets, and that planet, whatever it means for you in your chart, gets the luck, gets the abundance, gets support in some new way. So hopefully you have Venus there, or your own moon is right there, or your sun is right there, or other personal planets, Mercury. It all depends. But this is a new beginning for that area of your life. Regardless if you have any planets in Cancer, if you have no planets in Cancer, you still have an area of your chart that has the sign of Cancer, that rules an area. So that area itself will have some new opportunities, some better luck, some better support, and some growth and expansion in those ways that you're able to get what you want in an easier way, what you need to feel good. Now, this new moon at 4 degrees has a pretty tight sextile to Mars in Virgo. This Virgo area is still a bit critical because, again, this is eclipse territory. This is where the South Node is. This is where there still has to be a lot of work that gets done this year about purging and purifying that area of your life around health issues, around work and how you work, reorganizing, putting things in their proper place, making improvements by letting things go of the past, looking at habits and patterns. And Mars going through here, Mars is our action. And Mars in Virgo is more about getting down to the details, being more precise with how we take action and what we're doing. And so Mars is in great alignment with this new beginning that's going to be about this next month. A lot of July will be rooted here for this last week of June and what's taking place. So we have great opportunity for making a lot of improvements for the home, the family, the property, real estate. So it's actually a great cycle to get things done, like big projects about property and home projects. If you have to build something, if you want to start to expand, remodel something, this would be a great cycle to be doing that. Now, like I said, this new moon is only a couple degrees away from this Saturn-Neptune square, but it's a separating square. So we've already experienced the toughest part of the square to Saturn and Neptune, and that means we're not instantly, there's a sense that at first, right as we come into this new moon, we still are picking up on this background, this world dynamic that's changing. Saturn and Neptune in the beginning degrees of Aries is definitely the world going through a restructuring. It's a new era. It's basically a new world order, separate, different from the past 30, 40 years. We're really coming into something very, very different. You're already seeing that based on what's taking place in the world and these changes. So we still have that sense of heaviness and, with some uncertainty about it too, with Neptune there. That's that we're still feeling in the background. But as time goes on, day by day, we're moving away from that sense of restriction or limitation or heaviness or responsibilities that we're needing to take care of. And like I said, June being one of the toughest months with these squares going on to Saturn and Neptune, this is the beginning of things getting a lot easier for people on an individual level. I'd be very surprised if most people weren't having a difficult time in June. There's exceptions, of course, based on your birth chart, but in the background, it's been pretty tough. And now we're going to start moving away from that day by day, but it's still a little bit there in the beginning, so just keep that in mind. Not everything is just instantly perfect with this new moon. But this is a new moon to get stuff, to get what you want and get what you need, but it also requires taking the initiative, and that comes back to Mars. But the other part of this dynamic is that Mars is the ruler of this Saturn and this Neptune. And so the planet in charge of this big restructuring of the world is in harmony with this new beginning. So this is likely talking about, on the mundane level of things, the world is going to start to get a little easier in the short term. So there's probably going to be this, this agreement, I would imagine, that's coming in for the war stuff. It's going to start to get easier, more cooperative. So world dynamics will probably start to get easier day by day. Not perfect at first, but as time goes on. And then, like I said, if you need to do something, create something, build something, work on something, this is the cycle to get it and get it done and get your needs met with whatever it is that you want. So, this is a cycle to really to look at, like setting your intentions for something, using this to your advantage, and asking yourself, what do you need? What do you want? And then going after it and making it happen. But it's also, I think it's a healing cycle for a lot of people too, because Cancer, in my opinion, is one of the best healing signs of the zodiac. Cancer has that motherly vibe to it, and mothers can be some of the best healers. It's that nurturing vibe. It's a healing vibe. And when Jupiter there, Jupiter wants to start to expand healing and nurturing in a lot of ways. And then with this Mars and Virgo connected to it in a positive way, again, Virgo's also about health as well. And so it's about moving forward with health issues and making big improvements for your health routine and any procedures. If you have any medical procedures that you need to get done here in either this last week of June or July, I think that this is a positive time for it. Does it mean everybody will be able, there's still going to be, it all comes back to the birth chart, but this is the background, and I think it can be very supportive for people overall and very healing as time goes on. So again, that's a pretty good aspect that we have here with this new moon at 4 degrees on June 25. And that's the last aspect, is this new moon sextile that Mars. It's also very intuitive. Now, this is a super sensitive cycle. Keep that in mind. It's a cycle that people are going to be a little more guarded and inward, and it's a watery cycle. So it really comes back to a lot of strong emotions and feelings. And with Jupiter here, everything is amplified, bigger than normal. This is like one of the biggest new moons you're going to see in Cancer for the next 12. There's going to be another one, actually, because Jupiter will stay here into next year as well. But actually, I need to make sure that's correct. I'm pretty sure there'll be another Cancer new moon with Jupiter in Cancer. Let me just make sure here. 1 second. Whoa. Maybe not. Yeah. Sun comes into Cancer next year. Late June. Yeah, so this will be the only one with Jupiter in Cancer for the next 12 years. So this is definitely rare with this new moon conjunct Jupiter. So we're going to start to see some of the most growth and expansion of the year this next month, most of it through July. You're going to start to see some really big changes for your home, your family life, your inner life, and on the world stage. Okay, so again, that's the last aspect for Wednesday, which is interesting because it's first thing in the morning. So for most of the day, it's just this new moon that was rooted early morning hours. And then the moon is waxing forward into this new cycle. So all day on Wednesday, really set your intentions. Be mindful of how you're feeling and what you're thinking about. Mercury is starting to reach the last degree of Cancer as well. So there's going to be this beginning of thinking differently as well, especially as Mercury starts to sextile Uranus at this last critical degree. There's a sense of urgency for things to be changing, and pay attention to that so that you can just be more precise with what you get through this cycle. The more intentional you are and the more consistent you are with what you want and how you're feeling about the future, the better. But it's a great day to be working on things. Like I said, big projects are possible. Making big things happen, setting your intentions for those things, especially on a property, home, family level, I think is your best option. And then for health and then your work routine. All right, so moving forward, the moon's waxing forward all day long on Wednesday. And Mercury, like I said, reaches the last degree by Wednesday evening, Wednesday night. We start to have this sense of urgency with how we're thinking. Everything is still intuitive and emotional, though. And this whole cycle, that's what it's going to be about, intuition. More than, the mind is going to start to change, based on this new beginning that comes in for Wednesday into Thursday. So we get to Thursday on June 26th, and the moon is still in the early stages of this new beginning. And Mercury is sextile Uranus. But right off the bat, we start to get a lot of easier aspects for Thursday. So we're likely to see some sort of a positive result, most likely on the world stage for what's been going on Wednesday, and probably more so into Thursday. Start to see these more positive dynamics that leads to a mental change and a change with how people are communicating, and thinking about things as Mercury will change signs. But we start off, the first aspect is Mercury sextile Uranus. So we come into this position where, it's a sense of urgency for changes to thought and the way people are speaking, but it's about being innovative at this point, stepping outside the box with ideas. And that includes these ideas that you're trying to expand with any type of projects or plans or goals or whatever you're doing. We have an opportunity to try something different and be more open to changes with how we're working with things. Because normally Cancer, again, is more guarded and protective, and I think it's still going to be that way through this whole cycle. But it's also about, this is a cardinal sign. Cardinal is the most powerful. And Cancer is a very powerful sign. But it's about initiating new things around your needs and safety security things in the homeland, on the world stage. So, I think it's a good aspect with Mercury sextile Uranus. It's a little bit critical at first because it is the 29th degree. It's also connecting to financial things, looking at money and resources, and the markets are going to start to come into, we're at a turning point for the markets. Now, the markets, generally speaking, and when I say markets, I mostly go off of the SPY, which is an ETF from the S&P 500, because those are like the 500 top companies that really show the general market. I'm not too worried about like Mercury and its shadow or anything. Mercury doesn't rule the whole market or anything. It can have an effect on individual stocks, but we've kind of been in this position where we've come back up to the highs, but we've had to go like back and forth, a few percent, because we just haven't been ready to go into all-time new highs in a new way. So we're going to have to see how this dynamic plays out with the Venus getting closer to Uranus and they both leaving Taurus into Gemini, and then Mercury moving forward into Leo. To me, it looks positive, but we'll have to see. There could start to be some volatility, but overall, because we're in an abundant cycle here, it is possible we could see some high levels in the market here, which we already are. They're already there. Like I said, it's just a matter of, are we ready to take it to the next level or not? So we'll have to see. But I think in the beginning, things are looking pretty well. All right. Now, the sun is also sextile that Mars from the new moon. So again, we continue as we go through Wednesday and into Thursday to have a great alignment to be more decisive. Cancer isn't always the most direct. Cancer tends to be more about sidestepping and not going at things directly. But I think that this Mars sextile is much more helpful for Cancer to be more decisive, more direct, and to be working on things and to have a little more bravery and courage. Now, it's Mars in Virgo. It's not like extra or anything. Mars in Virgo it's more practical. It's about looking at practicality and working with practicality, trying to be more logical about things, not just emotional, what your emotional comfort is saying. But it's a good alignment overall to be more confident, be more precise with your activity, especially in this connection to home, family, property, real estate, work, health, and all of that as we're going through Thursday. So again, it's great for any kind of work or projects that you have to get done as we go through the day on Thursday. And then we have the moon connecting to Venus as well. So again, the moon is very strong here in its own sign. Venus is very strong in its own sign. Venus is starting to align with the nodes of fate as well. So this could be a very important day for the markets, for other financial things that are going on in the world and in personal lives as well. But with the moon sextile Venus, there's a good sense that we can get what we want here. We can feel more content and satisfied. This is a great aspect for food, comfort food, family relationships, family financial things going on too, support in some way or other financial support. And if you need something, want something. So if you need to apply for a bank loan or any kind of, if you need something basically, this is a great new moon. Like I said, I think overall Wednesday and Thursday, really set your intentions and try to get what you want, and you may be successful at that. But in this moment here on Thursday, first thing in the morning too, it's really early, we could just feel more satisfied, more content, more emotionally stable. And again, there could be good family stuff going on here as well. Overall, this cycle wants to expand family dynamics for people to be better than where they've been. So usually this wants to bring the family together. I really think it is something positive too, even in the United States financially, because Jupiter is moving over the United States Venus. The USA has Venus at 3 degrees of Cancer. So, and this is the beginning of a positive Jupiter transit for the United States, moving over the United States personal planets. It's not just this one day, it's the beginning of this whole cycle, like I said, and it will continue for the rest of the year. This is the cycle I've been waiting for and been telling you guys about, how I think it's going to be a turning point for a lot of easier and more abundant time periods. Now, does that mean everything is perfect and there's no issues going on in the world? No. That's just not how the world works. We're still going to have issues and ups and downs and challenges in certain ways based on, temporary transits and stuff. But in the bigger context, this is definitely a much more positive cycle. And the nodes of fate are being activated in multiple ways. We have Venus aligning with the nodes of fate in an easy way, a trine to the north node, or rather a sextile to the north node and a trine to the south node. We have the moon making a trine to the north node and sextile the south node as the moon is sextile Venus. You can see this aspect on the chart. So it's a very fateful moment here, first thing on Thursday and all through Thursday, around relationships, money, and home and families, property, real estate. If you're trying to do anything about real estate, this could be a really great day for real estate stuff on Thursday. I say Wednesday and Thursday, and even for this whole cycle, but especially in this moment, because it could have a long-term effect on the future financially and whatever is happening here. So I'm liking to see that. And then we have a big change. We have Mercury changing signs into Leo. And this will be, this will be later on in the afternoon hours that the mind starts to change. Communications start to change into a much more outward, less intuitive, and much more instinctive and fiery and passionate and bold communication. And it comes into this area that's people are a little more dramatic in the way that they communicate. Usually it's more outgoing and happy, and it's a little more social, but Mercury still has to get through some aspects here, including that opposition to Pluto. So group and community stuff, I think, is going to start getting a little more riled up. The news, the media is going to start to communicate differently than it has been. And again, people just want to be more creative and a little extra with how they're communicating. But Mercury's going to start to align in a better way with Saturn and Neptune, and the way that we're thinking about the future, this new world dynamic that's building, we're going to start to come more into alignment with it. And then we're going to enter territory where we're going to have to process a lot about what starts to come in, especially next week, like I said, when Mercury enters its retrograde shadow. So first we have to get past these first few degrees, but this is a pretty big change overall. And now that Mercury's in Leo, it's being ruled by the sun, and the sun is right next to Jupiter in a sextile with Mars. So I think for the most part, the way people are thinking is more positive, more optimistic, and again, a little more extra and a little more fun too, fun and creative and expressive as Mercury comes into this position. Now the moon has to get through a square with Chiron for a few hours here on Thursday, second half of the day. So a few emotional insecurities or sensitivities could come up. And then the moon will get through that, and the moon will sextile Uranus at this last degree as well, the same aspect that Mercury went through. So moon sextile Uranus, now we're feeling more comfortable. Let me get to that point. It's on Thursday night before the moon changes signs. So the last aspect before the moon changes signs is that connection to Uranus. Again, being more comfortable with change, being more innovative, and a sense of urgency for things to be changing. And then that's what happens. We get into the last aspect late on Thursday night. It's early morning hours for other people on Friday morning. The moon ingresses Leo with Mercury. And now the heart and the mind have really changed into a new dynamic. The way people are communicating and feeling about things has greatly changed. And that changes the Cancerian vibes as well, because the moon is in charge of this Cancer cycle. So the moon is always changeable. Moods and feelings, they change quickly every couple of days as we go through this Cancer lunar cycle. We got monsoon season starting here. So we got our first rains coming in. You might hear that in the background. So anyway, now things are much more fiery and passionate and bold and becoming more outward, not as guarded as before, much more creative and emotionally expressive. But there is still some intensity in the background with the group and the community and politics, science and technology. There's definitely some big new dynamics as we get late on Thursday night into Friday, June 27. And now even the moon is in better harmony with this Saturn and this Neptune. So we're starting to really move away from that sense of restriction and limitation and feeling like we have more support and looking at the future in a much better way. All right, so June 27th, that first aspect, moon conjunct Mercury, that is usually very social. Now, this is the overnight hours, though, of late Thursday into Friday morning, so it may not affect everybody on a social level, but it's typically much more social and communicative. And like I said, wanting to be more fun. The moon in Leo loves attention, loves to express itself, emotionally and through the body, dancing kind of stuff, and just more social, more fun, in some way. So because it's the overnight hours, it may not affect everybody, but the mood is starting to really change here. And then the moon comes into alignment with Saturn and Neptune in an easier way. Moon trine Saturn, moon trine Neptune. So we still have this connection. It's very instinctive and fiery and passionate. And we're just, generally speaking, a little more comfortable with the world dynamics of what's going on. All right, and then, though, the moon has to get through that opposition with Pluto, and that's the most intense out of the short term here. So again, this is really passionate, strong, a little extra with how people are expressing, a little more dramatic. Again, there's also a strong social dynamic in the air on Friday for people. So this is first thing in the morning on the West Coast, but in places like Europe, it's well into the day. So again, things start to turn more outward and more social, but in some sort of intense way, probably. There could be some intensity with groups and communities or something, gathering, just some sort of strong new dynamic in that regard with people. And People are just, like I said, more dramatic, a little more extra, and undercurrents of power and control and transformation taking place for Friday, June 27. And then Mercury, the last aspect on Friday, is Mercury trine Saturn. So we do have this capability to be looking at responsibilities and being able to feel more confident about taking the initiative with big things of life that we want to do and need to do. And then also being more inspired as Mercury is building up that trine to Neptune as well. And now Jupiter has reached the 4th degree of Cancer, the degree of the new moon. And a lot of that new moon, we're going to start seeing the more positive side of it starting to expand from this point forward more and more. Especially, I think, once that Mercury gets past Pluto as well. But even now on Friday, and that's all day on Friday, the moon is waxing through Leo. So Friday wants to have fun. People generally want to have fun. Emotionally expressive, creative, recreation, things with children, building up. Still a strong focus on the home and the family through this whole cycle. So it is kind of a better day for recreational type things and activities as you get into the weekend. All right, and if you need to do any major like paperwork, if you need to deal with government or authority figures, this is a great time to be working on that on Friday with Mercury trine Saturn. There's better communication with authorities. We're more in alignment with authorities, and authorities are more open to hearing what people are saying and what they need and want. So again, if you need to deal with paperwork or anything like that, or apply for something, if you need to apply for a job, this would be a great day to do it on Friday. Or any type of application of any type, like I said, any kind of paperwork would be a great day to do it. Remember, this whole cycle is a great cycle for trying to get what you want and what you need, and there's better opportunity for that to happen. So really try to do that. If there's anything you want or need, be working on those things, as we're building up through this whole cycle. All right, and then we get to the weekend on Saturday, June 28, and Mercury is trine Neptune the overnight hours, late Friday into Saturday morning. So now we have this outlet for being more inspired, more dreamy, more creative. It's a great aspect for producing something as well. If you need to work on, especially with the Saturn component, if you're trying to work on a creative project of some type, especially any type of producing, this would be generally a great aspect to do that with, especially because the moon is still in Leo, waxing forward. So there could also be a little bit more of a romanticizing vibe in the air. Relationships are starting to build up to be more exciting as well as Venus gets closer and closer to Uranus. But still, Venus is in a strong position, so generally, relationships should be fairly good unless you have a personal difficult transit to your Venus or your 7th house planet or 7th house ruler, then you might be the exception. But generally, this is showing that we're in a better relationship phase. But the moon is going to be building up to a little bit of drama when it squares Venus and Uranus eventually here. But now we have a couple aspects, including the moon in conjunct to the north node of destiny as we go through Saturday. So there's distractions from behind the scenes. There's energetic sensitivity. There's a pull to more inward, more sensitive life versus being more outward and social and bold with the circumstances of the day, which are going to dominate that kind of vibe still, because it's stronger than this in conjunction to the background, or again having to adjust in some way with distractions on Saturday late morning or afternoon. And then the moon is also squaring Venus for a couple hours here in the afternoon and evening hours. And this is where there is a little bit of some issue going on, most likely on Saturday. It doesn't have to be a major big deal necessarily, but it's, moon in Leo. It wants attention. People generally want more attention and love and pleasure. And it's kind of a little bit too much in some way where it's a little more challenging to feel content necessarily. There could still be opportunity for love and pleasure and attention and social dynamics and having fun and getting, feeling more pleasured and satisfied, but there's a lot more tension in that dynamic. And this can also be a lot more tension between women. Sometimes this can be an aspect of hurt feelings in some way in that moment, or again, wanting more attention and love in a relationship, and maybe it's not in that dynamic in the way that you want it or something. It's very temporary, so I don't think it's going to be some big overwhelming issue. And the moon goes through these squares every month, but this is Saturday night or Saturday evening, Saturday night. Yeah, it's Saturday night because, Saturday evening, Saturday night, depending on where you live. So Saturday night could be a little more volatile because the moon is also building up the square to Uranus late that night. So the mood is a little more unpredictable. People's own mood swings could start to come in, be a little off in some way. There could be some unpredictability, some surprises. There could be some disruptions in what's going on, so just be aware of that dynamic. I don't think it's like necessarily crisis or anything, because Venus is involved, moon and Venus. I don't think it's like super negative or anything, but just be mindful that if you do have plans on Saturday night, especially late Saturday night, maybe the plans could change or some disruption happens, some change out of the blue happens. Maybe not for everybody, but it's possible, in the background there. The moon is trine Chiron at first, late on Saturday night, so that's feeling more confident about the self and wanting to express self in this more bold outward way. But then that square comes in really late on Saturday night. So for other people, it's going to be into Sunday morning, early Sunday morning. That's when things get a little more dramatic in some way, potentially. Let's see here. That's actually the following day on Sunday morning, the overnight hours of Saturday night into Sunday morning. And that's the same time period as we get to Sunday on June 29th. There is something probably going on late Saturday night into Sunday early morning hours, because that's when Mercury is opposing Pluto, So something more intense socially could be happening, disruptive, chaotic, or just some surprises. So if you are out late on Saturday night into the early morning hours of Sunday, just be aware of this, know your surroundings, maybe nothing happens. And that's the case how it'll usually play out. It's not like every single place in the world will experience something, but there's usually at least one or two or a few places, that gets a headline or something happens, so for the most part, the odds are you're going to be fine, but you just never know where it's going to be. I could look at the geodetic map and try to figure out some places, but just generally for the world here, just be extra cautious. Just be mindful of this aspect on Sunday morning, early morning hours. So moods could surprise you. People's responses could surprise you. And there's just some sort of intensity. This can also be a little bit of intensity around travel, transportation, news and media. Like I said, I think it's social in a lot of ways. I think it's connecting to the group, the community. Maybe there's something getting riled up in a community dynamic. Something like that is very possible. And then the mind is connected to Pluto. So there's like this mental intensity. There's this need to get down to the bottom of something, of truth. But there's opposition to that. The deeper undercurrents that people want to speak about and communicate about and think about. But Leo wants to be more happy, joyful, but I think it's dramatic, whatever's happening. But it's also about picking up on deeper truths and deeper dynamics and hidden things that are coming out as well. And I would just say it could play out in multiple ways. It could be transportation or traveling issues in some cases. It could also be weather events or, extreme events going on in other ways around the world. So just be mindful. That's one of the bigger dynamics I see of a little more challenge first thing on Sunday morning. Right as, the moon is squaring Uranus, so we'll see what plays out. And then there's a lot of inconjunctions right after that because the moon changes signs right after that, and it shows that there's a big mood change based on the circumstances of early Sunday morning. And the moon coming into Virgo now is right next to Mars. So there is some sort of more intensity and emotional tension coming up. But now that the moon is in Virgo, now the circumstances for the next 2.5 days are being ruled by Mercury in this opposition to Pluto, and then Mercury enters its retrograde shadow right after this. So strong changing dynamics for Sunday and then into next week. But the moon coming into Virgo now next to Mars, it's a little more critical, especially because it's being ruled by Mercury opposite Pluto. And then next to Mars, people are a little more critical, edgy, but circumstances want to get more practical for Sunday. Less dramatic, less fun, less recreation or social, and now get down to business, get to things that are more practical, work inclined, or the health stuff could be coming up. Now, luckily, this moon is going to connect to Jupiter and the sun in a sextile. So I think it's still talking about this cycle that's still overall positive, and like I said, Jupiter's crossing over the new moon degree. So a lot of the new moon is showing and moving forward and being amplified and expanded, within this cycle. But now it comes back to those issues or those opportunities to get what you want in more of these practical ways, like health issues and healing, or, work projects come back around to be, I think, a stronger dynamic for people on Sunday into next week of Monday. So a lot more physical activity, narrowing the focus, getting more practical. But again, this is all eclipse territory, Virgo. Virgo is all where we have to make changes to work routines. The workers, purging, purifying, making improvements to things for the next 2.5 days. But those improvements come with letting go of old patterns, old habits, old ways of doing things, while building and structuring new things. But there's a lot of inconjunctions now that the moon has to make. The moon is inconjunct to Saturn, Neptune, and Pluto pretty much for the first part of the day. And in fact, the finger of God aspect comes in from Pluto to Neptune and Saturn. So this is going to be late morning or afternoon hours, depending on where you live. So another finger of God shows, karmic things that are outside of our control, things happening from a higher power, that are karmic and fateful that we're having to make a lot of adjustments to. And part of it is the world structure, the world order, authority figures, the group, the community, politics, science, technology type of stuff, or just the overall social dynamics versus the moon in this more practical position of work, service, and health issues that could be, big circumstances that we're dealing with. Plus the moon next to Mars. It's a little more critical as we come into Sunday. Again, it started late Saturday night into Sunday morning. But then after the moon gets through those tense dynamics of a lot of either irritation or adjustment to what's going on in the mood and the feelings of things, then the moon connects to that Jupiter and the sun as it's conjunct Mars. So the second half of Sunday is the best time to be working on things, getting things done, feeling like you can be expanding and overall getting things done, feeling more support with the moon sextile Jupiter. but it's right there on Mars too. So a lot of activity that wants to be more practical, precise. People could still be a little more critical with their communications because, again, it leads back to Mercury still opposite Pluto. So truths could be coming out in new ways, media, communications, or like I said, there could have been critical transportation or traveling events. So, or the group community social stuff, like I said, got a little bit critical, and people are still trying to adjust as we're going through Sunday, or weather or other things happening that are just a little more tense for whatever reason. And it's also more passionate, instinctive, but more in this practical, logical way with Moon, Mars, and Virgo. Again, it's a great day to be working on things because we're able to see what needs to change, what needs to, where things belong, how to put things in their proper place and order, and purify, purge, and all of that. But definitely pay attention to health on this day, on Sunday. It's still a great day for any kind of work or projects for home, family, property, and things like that. So it can still be a physical day for work. And then the moon sextile of the sun tends to be pretty positive generally. Feeling more comfortable, feeling more cooperation with others, and feeling like things can be working out once we get past all the kind of strange dynamics of the first part of the day. Because this is late. This is the last aspect on Sunday night, moon sextile sun. Feeling more content and comfortable with whatever we're doing, perhaps. All right, then we get to Monday on June 30. And there's just one major aspect, and that is not going to be until much later in the day the moon will reach the nodes of fate. So it's a fateful day on Monday, and there's not a lot of aspects, but we're still going to have a lot going on based on the background and these other dynamics that were already in play. So I think Sunday really changes the mood and the circumstances, that kind of carry over into Monday. So Monday can still be a day of a lot of activity, a lot of work, a little more criticalness in the air, but more logical, more practical, working on home, family projects, more instinctive as well. But again, whatever happens will have a long-term effect on the future. And Venus is getting really close to Uranus now, within a few degrees. So financial things are going to start to fluctuate a little bit by next week. Mercury enters its retrograde shadow. So again, this is where Mercury is going to retrograde back to and station direct after the retrograde process is done. So from this point forward, whatever's coming up, whatever we're thinking about, whatever's in the media, the news, is going to be something that we're going to process all through July and into August before it's all said and done or it's clear. So really pay attention to what comes in next week. Of course, I'll be talking more about it as I get to next week's report. But yeah, we enter some territory here, that we're going to be processing and thinking about in a certain way for a while. But I still like that Mercury doesn't retrograde back to the opposition with Pluto. So we're done with the Pluto dynamic, and slowly Mercury will be moving away from that. Like I said, just because Mercury enters its retrograde shadow doesn't mean we're in Mercury retrograde. Mercury's still going to be direct for the first half of Leo, all through July here. So it just means territory we're going to be working with for a while is all. All right, so moving this forward, like I said, the moon's going through Virgo all day on Monday. So it's more about the details. It's more about practicality, work, service, and health life. And then with the moon approaching that south node, that's eclipse territory. That's about, again, kind of things that are happening that could still be connected to the future and karmic things of the past could be coming around. Again, old stuff that we need to work on that's not finalized, that we need to purge. Still an area of purification that we could work on. What do you need to release and get rid of on either energetically or literally? So work and service and health life, generally speaking, is the biggest dynamic of all that. But it's fateful and karmic, based on what happens for Monday, June 30th. And that's the dynamic all day. The moon will be conjunct that south node Monday night. So I think it's still a fateful day all day, but especially Monday night, whatever's happening. All right, so that's what I have for you folks. I hope that's helpful. Appreciate you watching, and I hope you have a great week ahead. Take good care.